I never thought my life would change because of a broken-down car. But that's exactly how I met the man who would become both my greatest love and the source of my most challenging battle. My name is Avery, and 5 years ago I was stranded on the side of Highway 16 with a smoking engine and a completely dead cell phone. The sun was setting, and every car that passed made my heart jump, only to sink again as they zoomed by. Just as I was contemplating the long walk ahead, a blue Subaru pulled over. "Need some help?" The driver rolled down his window, revealing a familiar face I couldn't quite place. "Wait, don't you work in marketing at Preston and Mills?" That's when I recognized him, Ethan Turner from the fourth floor. We'd passed each other in the hallways but never really talked. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile that made me lower my guard immediately. "The engine just started smoking," I explained, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I was hoping to make it to the next exit, but—" "Pop the hood," he said, already getting out of his car. "I'm no mechanic, but I might be able to help." As Ethan examined my car, I noticed how his shoulders tensed when his phone buzzed. He checked it quickly, frowned, and shoved it back in his pocket. "My mother," he muttered, almost to himself. "She'll have to wait." That should have been my first clue about Diane Turner, but I was too distracted by how Ethan's presence made me feel surprisingly safe. He diagnosed a blown radiator hose and called a tow truck for me, insisting on waiting until it arrived. We talked while we waited, and something clicked between us. He was funny in a quiet way, self-deprecating but sharp. When he mentioned getting coffee sometime, I found myself saying yes before I could overthink it. His phone buzzed again, and this time I caught a glimpse of the screen. 15 missed calls from Mom. Ethan's jaw tightened as he declined the call. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just family stuff," he said with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My brother's son had a school play tonight. Mom's probably upset I missed it to work late." There was something in his tone, a resignation that made me wonder what kind of family dynamics could make a grown man look so defeated by a missed school play. But before I could ask more, the tow truck arrived, its headlights cutting through the growing darkness. As I climbed into the truck's cab, Ethan handed me his business card. "Call me when you get home safe?" he asked, and I nodded, not realizing I was saying yes to so much more than just a phone call. 6 months into dating Ethan, I finally met his family at what would become an unforgettable Sunday dinner. The moment we stepped into his parents' sprawling Victorian home, I sensed the undercurrent of tension beneath the polite smiles and warm hugs. Diane Turner, Ethan's mother, barely glanced at us before rushing to the door, where Ethan's brother Mark was arriving with his son Charlie. "There's my special boy," she cooed, scooping Charlie into her arms. "I made your favorite dessert, chocolate mousse, just like you love it." I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. "Mom, I brought that wine you asked for," he said, holding up an expensive bottle of Cabernet. "Oh, just put it in the kitchen, dear," Diane replied without looking our way, still fawning over Charlie. "Mark, honey, tell me about that big case you just won." Throughout dinner, I watched a painful pattern unfold. Every time Ethan tried to share news about his recent promotion, Diane would interrupt with questions about Mark's law practice or Charlie's latest achievement in Little League. Even Robert, Ethan's father, seemed resigned to this dynamic, offering only weak smiles when catching his younger son's defeated expression. Actually, I cut in during one of Diane's lengthy praise sessions about Mark's new house. "Ethan just closed a major account that's going to transform the company's entire marketing strategy." The silence that followed was deafening. Dan's smile tightened. "Well, isn't that nice?" "Charlie, sweetheart, show everyone your science fair medal." Later, as we helped clear the table, I overheard Diane in the kitchen with Mark. "I just worry about Ethan sometimes," she was saying. "He seems so settled for less. This marketing job, and now this girlfriend." My hands clenched around the plates I was carrying. Before I could step in, Mark surprised me. "Mom, come on. Ethan's doing great and Avery seems wonderful." "Oh, I'm sure she's fine, dear. I just always hoped he'd aim higher like you did." When we left that night, Ethan was quieter than usual. In the car, I reached for his hand. You know that promotion was impressive, right? Your mother's wrong. It's always been like this, he said softly. Sometimes I wonder if she even sees me at all. I thought about the way Diane's eyes had slid past Ethan all evening, like he was a shadow in his own family. Something hardened in my chest, a protective instinct, maybe, or the first spark of revenge. Whatever future we built together, I decided right then that no child of mine would ever feel invisible in their own family. We should talk about this, I said carefully. About your mother and what it means for us. Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I know, he whispered. I know we do. The annual Turner family Christmas party became the breaking point I should have seen coming. Ethan and I had been engaged for 3 months, and I was already 4 months pregnant, though we hadn't told anyone yet. We'd planned to announce it during dinner, hoping some happy news might bring the family together. I couldn't have been more wrong. Everyone, we have an announcement, Ethan started, squeezing my hand under the table. But before he could continue, Diane burst in from the kitchen. Mark and Charlie have something to share first. She was practically glowing. Charlie just got accepted into the gifted program at Westminster Academy, the same school Mark attended. The timing couldn't have been worse. As everyone erupted in congratulations, I watched Ethan's face fall. He'd been accepted to the same program 30 years ago, but his parents couldn't afford 2 tuitions. He'd gone to public school instead, while Mark attended Westminster. That's wonderful, Ethan managed, his voice strained. But Avery and I. And Mark's firm is paying for it, Diane continued, completely talking over him. My brilliant boy, following in his father's footsteps. Robert, remember when Mark won that scholarship? Actually, Robert spoke up, surprising everyone, Ethan won that scholarship too, Diane. He turned it down so we could afford. Oh, that was ages ago. Diane waved her hand dismissively. Charlie, sweetheart, tell everyone about your entrance interview. I felt something snap inside me. Maybe it was the hormones, or maybe it was watching the man I loved shrink smaller with each passing moment. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Ethan and I are having a baby, I announced firmly. I'm due in May. The silence was absolute. Diane's face went through a series of expressions before settling on something between confusion and disappointment. Oh, well, that's nice. Charlie, darling, what classes will you be taking? Are you kidding me? The words burst out before I could stop them. Your son just told you he's going to be a father, and you can't even acknowledge it? Avery, Ethan whispered, tugging at my sleeve. But I was done being quiet. No, Ethan. This has to stop. Do you know your son won the Morrison account last month? The biggest in the company's history? Or that he's been promoted to creative director? Of course not, because you're too busy fawning over Mark and Charlie to notice anything Ethan does. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Robert stared into his wine glass. And Diane? She looked at me like I'd just tracked mud across her pristine floors. I don't think you understand how this family works, she said coldly. No, I replied, resting my hand protectively over my stomach. I understand perfectly. And my child will never have to understand it the way Ethan did. After the Christmas dinner disaster, I found myself sitting in my obstetrician's waiting room, staring at the ultrasound photo in my hands. A girl. We were having a little girl. Instead of joy, all I felt was dread. Imagining her growing up watching her cousin Charlie receive all of Diane's love and attention while she stood in the shadows. Just like her father had. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Can we meet for coffee? I need to talk. I almost ignored it, but something in the message's simplicity made me agree. An hour later, I sat across from my future brother-in-law at a quiet cafe, watching him struggle to find the right words. I never saw it before, he finally said, stirring his untouched coffee. The way Mom treats Ethan. I mean, I knew she was harder on him, but he pulled out his phone, showing me a photo from their childhood. Two boys at a science fair, Ethan's project clearly more elaborate, yet Mark holding the first place ribbon. Ethan should have one, Mark admitted. Mom was one of the judges. My hands clenched around my cup. Why are you telling me this now? Because last night after you left, Mom started planning Charlie's future at Westminster. She talked about setting up a trust fund for him, money that was supposed to be split between both grandchildren. He looked up, his face troubled. She doesn't even know you're having a girl yet, but she's already choosing favorites. Cafe suddenly felt too small, too warm. Does Ethan know about the trust fund? No. And there's more. Mom's been pressuring Dad to change their will, to leave the house to me because I have Charlie to think about. Mark ran a hand through his hair. I've been blind, Avery. Complicit. A server dropped a plate somewhere behind us, the crash making us both jump. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I need to protect my daughter, I said, standing up. And maybe it's time someone protected Ethan too. What are you going to do? I thought about the ultrasound photo in my purse, about Ethan's face every time his mother dismissed him, about our unborn daughter's future. Whatever it takes, I replied. But first, I need to know everything, every instance of favoritism, every manipulation, every secret. Will you help me? Mark looked at the childhood photo again, then nodded slowly. It's time someone stood up to her. But Avery. His expression darkened. Be careful. You don't know what Mom's capable of when she feels threatened. I touched my stomach, feeling my daughter kick. Neither does she. Our wedding day should have been perfect. The spring garden venue, Ethan's proud smile, my growing baby bump barely visible under the flowing dress. Everything I dreamed of. But Diane Turner had other plans. I first noticed something was wrong during the reception when I couldn't find my new mother-in-law for our family photos. I found her instead in a quiet corner, showing wedding guests photos of Charlie's recent piano recital on her phone. And here he is receiving his certificate, she was saying to my aunt. He's so gifted, just like his father. Such a blessing to have such accomplished men in the family. My aunt, bless her, glanced at me uncertainly. What about Ethan? He seems quite successful too. Oh yes, he does. Fine. Dan's smile tightened. Though I always hoped he'd aim higher. And now with this rushed wedding because of the baby. I stepped back into the shadows, my hands trembling. That's when I heard Robert's voice from around the corner. Enough, Diane. This is their wedding day. I'm just being honest, Robert. Mark and Charlie are the future of this family. Ethan's always been. Well, you know. And this girl he's married, she's already causing trouble, turning him against me. By expecting basic respect for her husband? For their child. That baby. Dan's voice dropped lower. I've already arranged everything for Charlie's future. I won't have some half-baked granddaughter taking what's rightfully his. I pressed my hand against my mouth, fighting back nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. I turned to find Mark, his face ashen. I heard everything, he said quietly. Avery, I'm so sorry. I knew Mom played favorites, but this... She's already decided to hate my daughter, I whispered. She hasn't even met her yet. Mark reached for his phone, hesitated, then showed me something. A series of emails between Diane and the family lawyer, discussing ways to ensure Charlie inherited everything, even suggesting ways to legally exclude my unborn child from any family trusts. I found these when I was helping Dad with computer issues, Mark said. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. That moment, Ethan appeared, his face glowing with happiness. There's my beautiful wife. Ready for our first dance? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw all the years of hurt hidden behind his smile. Then I thought of our daughter, imagining her facing the same pain, the same rejection, the same cruel dismissal from her grandmother. Actually, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me, I think it's time we had a different kind of dance. Mark, would you please show Ethan those emails? The music played on in the reception hall, but in that moment, everything changed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served right in the middle of your own wedding reception. 3 days after Lily was born, Diane showed up at the hospital with a silver rattle for the baby. It would have been a nice gesture if she hadn't immediately launched into a story about the solid gold one she'd given Charlie, or if she hadn't followed it with pointed questions about our financial planning for Lily's future. "I just worry," she said, watching me cradle my daughter. "Mark and Charlie have such security. It must be hard knowing you can't provide the same for Lily." The emails from the wedding were still fresh in my mind. I looked at my sleeping daughter, perfect and innocent, already being measured and found wanting by her grandmother. "Actually," I said quietly, "we need to talk about those trust funds you've been arranging." Dan's face went blank. "I don't know what you mean. The ones you're setting up for Charlie, using money that was meant for both grandchildren." I kept my voice low, conscious of Ethan sleeping in the chair beside me. The emails to the lawyer were quite clear. "You had no right to." "No right?" My laugh was bitter. "You're literally stealing from my daughter before she's even started life. What gives you the right to decide she deserves less?" "I'm protecting this family's legacy," Diane hissed, dropping all pretense. "Charlie is a Turner through and through. Your daughter, well, who knows what she'll become given her mother's background." The monitor tracking my heart rate began beeping faster. "Get out." "You're being dramatic." "This is exactly why." I said get out. My voice shook. "And know this, if you don't make this right, if you don't fix those trust funds and start treating both grandchildren equally, you'll never see Lily again. I'll make sure of it." Diane's face twisted into something ugly. "You really think you can threaten me? I've been managing this family since before you were born. Finn will never choose you over his mother. He never has the strength to stand up to me, and you know it." As if on cue, Ethan stirred. "Mom? What's going on?" I watched Diane's face transform instantly into concerned motherly worry. "Nothing, dear. Just checking on the baby. Though I am a bit concerned about Avery's emotional state. These postpartum hormones can be so difficult." Finn looked between us, confusion evident. I opened my mouth to tell him everything, but Lily chose that moment to wake up crying. In the chaos of soothing her, Diane slipped out, leaving behind the silver rattle and the bitter taste of defeat. Later, holding Lily while she nursed, I realized something. Diane was right about one thing. This wasn't just about trust funds or favoritism anymore. This was about power, who had it, who wanted it, and what they'd do to keep it. And I had just declared war on someone who'd been playing this game for decades. Lily's third birthday party should have been perfect. I'd planned everything meticulously, the butterfly decorations, the tiny cupcakes, even coordinating with Mark to ensure Charlie felt special as the older cousin. But I should have known Diane would find a way to destroy it. I first noticed something was wrong when I couldn't find Lily during the party games. "Has anyone seen Lily?" I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. "Oh, she was just at the playground," Diane said casually, showing Charlie how to properly hold his new baseball bat, her gift to him at my daughter's party. "I'm sure she's fine." Playground. Cross the park. Unsupervised. My heart stopped. I ran, calling Lily's name, finding her alone on the swings, tears streaming down her face. "Grandma said she'd push me," she hiccuped. But Charlie needed help with his bat. Something snapped inside me. I carried Lily back to the party, where Diane was still fawning over Charlie. Finn met us halfway, his face darkening when he saw Lily's tears. "What happened?" "Your mother left our 3-year-old alone at the playground," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Party went silent. "Because Charlie needed her." "I only stepped away for a moment," Diane protested. "You're being dramatic again." "Dramatic?" Ethan's voice was different than I'd ever heard it. You abandoned my daughter on her birthday to teach baseball to Charlie? Now, Ethan, Diane started, but Robert cut her off. Enough, Diane. His quiet voice carried across the yard. I've watched you favor one grandchild over another, just like you favored one son. I said nothing, thinking you'd change. But this? Endangering a child to prove a point? Mark stepped forward, pulling Charlie close. Mom, this has to stop. What you're doing, it's not just favoritism anymore. It's cruel. I'm trying to protect this family. Diane's composure cracked. Everything I've done was to keep us together, to maintain our standards. By hurting children? I challenged, holding Lily tighter. By making them feel worthless? You don't understand, Dan's voice broke. My mother did the same to me. I was never good enough, never the favorite. I swore I'd do better, create a perfect family. And instead, Ethan said quietly, you became her. The silence that followed was deafening. Diane looked around at her fractured family. Robert's disappointment, Mark's protective stance over Charlie, Ethan's newfound strength, and me, still holding Lily. I think, Robert said finally, it's time we all went home. And Diane? Pack a bag. You'll be staying with your sister until we figure this out. As Diane's carefully constructed world crumbled around her, I felt no satisfaction, only relief. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about breaking the cycle of hurt before it claims another generation. 6 months after Lily's birthday party, I received an unexpected letter from Diane. She was in therapy, living separately from Robert while they worked through their issues. I almost threw the letter away, but something made me keep reading. I see myself in you, she wrote. The fierce protection, the determination to shield your child from pain. I thought I was protecting my family too, but I was really just perpetuating the damage my mother did to me. Breaking one child to elevate another isn't protection, it's destruction. I read the letter to Ethan that night after putting Lily to bed. He sat quietly for a long moment, then showed me a text from Mark. Their father had finally filed for divorce. Do you think people can really change? I asked, watching Lily sleep through her bedroom doorway. I don't know, Ethan replied. But I know we have. He was right. Past months had transformed us all. Mark had become the brother Ethan always deserved, making sure both children felt equally loved during family gatherings. Robert had found his voice, standing up for what was right instead of maintaining peace at any cost. And Ethan, my quiet, conflict-avoiding husband, had become a fierce advocate for our daughter's worth. Last weekend, we had a small family dinner. Just us, Mark, Charlie, and Robert. Watching Charlie teach Lily how to build with Legos, I realized something profound. The children had never been the problem. They loved each other naturally, freely, without the poison of comparison or competition. Diane asked to see Lily, Robert mentioned carefully over coffee. She's been doing the work, facing her own childhood trauma. She says she understands now why what she did was so damaging. I thought about revenge then, how I'd once dreamed of making Diane feel the pain she'd caused, of excluding her the way she'd tried to exclude my daughter. But looking at Lily and Charlie playing, I saw a better way forward. Tell her she can see Lily, I said finally. With supervision and only if she continues therapy. Not because she deserves it, but because Lily deserves the chance to know her grandmother, the real her. Not the wounded woman who tried to recreate her own mother's cruelty. Later that night, I found the silver rattle Diane had given Lily in the hospital. I kept it all this time, though I'm not sure why. Maybe as evidence, maybe as a reminder. Now looking at it, I saw it differently, not as a symbol of inequality, but as a first step, however flawed, toward change. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in destroying your enemy, but in breaking the patterns that created them. And sometimes healing comes not from getting even, but from getting better, better than the hurt, better than the hate, better than the history we inherit.